What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul. I make videos about Japanese society, life, and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I've been in Japan for 20 years now, and I want to start off today just by saying thank you so much to all of my long-time subscribers. You know who you are. You've been here for some years now. You've been commenting on my videos almost every week. Thank you so much to you. And thank you to my newest subscribers who have come along in kind of the growth of my channel that's happened recently. And I'm saying thanks to you because it really is thanks to you that I'm able to say this next thing. This video is brought to you by Sakurako. Sakurako is a monthly artisan Japanese snack box that ships worldwide, and I will tell you more about that later. But first, let's get into today's topic. Now, today's topic is actually two topics. They are basically two sides of the same coin. One side is how to know if Japan is right for you and you feel like this is really a country you could live in the long term, like what type of foreigner stays in Japan for a long time. And the other side of the coin is how can you gauge or come to understand and really correctly identify when it might be time to leave Japan, that it's no longer a good thing for yourself, for your life, to remain in Japan, and it's time to leave. This is a topic that has often been requested in the comments section of some of my videos, and people have even asked me for this over PM in my Instagram account. And if you don't follow me on Instagram, it's easy to find because the channel name and my Instagram account are the same, X-Chapter, so go follow me over there. But without further ado, let's talk about it. I'm dividing the topic into 4 different factors or 4 different things to consider. And the first one is your professional goals or your professional life. I feel like there's 3 types of people who come to Japan. There's people who have a professional goal in mind that has nothing to do with Japan. They're coming here to enjoy Japan for a few years, get some experience, enjoy the country, and then leave. They've got that figured out. The next type are people who, like me, have decided that I really want to make a go of a career in Japan. You've got the education or training for that particular job, and you give a try to live in Japan for the long term. And for me, I'm an English teacher in a university, and so it's a career path that I can follow here and be successful in. And so it's not a big stretch for me to consider Japan a long-term home. But I think the majority of people come to Japan wanting to experience it without really having professional goals in mind and not really knowing if it's going to be a forever home or just something for a couple of years. And so I just want to speak briefly to those people, and that's something where you have to gauge as you go along with what you're doing. For example, if you come here and do one of the probably the most likely jobs if you're coming from a country like the US, Canada, Australia, etc., which is to speak or teach, speak English. Teach English. And so you teach English, and at some point you're going to realize whether you enjoy this job or not. Whether you enjoy teaching, is there anything upwardly mobile in your job? If you're an assistant language teacher in a public school, there probably aren't any advancement opportunities. If you're working in an English conversation school or eikaiwa, advancement there is usually in the realm of management or recruiting, not teaching. So if that's your thing, maybe that's a good path to take. But you need to take a good stock, whatever you're doing. Do you enjoy your job? Does your career allow you some kind of advancement? And if not, you might want to question what you're doing. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a Japan deal breaker, but it's something to keep in mind because there is a particular trap that you can fall into, and that is you've taught English for a few years and you realize that I haven't built up any skills or experience that are going to transfer to anything else if I move back to my home country. And I don't have a lot of money because I didn't have a really high salary teaching English, and now I feel kind of stuck. What do I do? That is definitely a trap that you want to try to avoid happening to you. So take stock after 1 year, 2 years. Do I really enjoy this teaching thing? If not, well, maybe it's time not necessarily to move somewhere else, but maybe start hunting for other possible opportunities. Are you learning Japanese? Like, having a Japanese ability will open up different avenues of types of jobs you could possibly try for. So yeah, professional goals, professional life, keep those things in mind. The next one is personal goals. What do you want out of your life? And the first thing I'll say is it's perfectly possible to have really fulfilling personal life things happening for you in Japan, like the hobby that you're pursuing, certain knowledge that you're trying to gain, experiences you're trying to have, and your job is just there to kind of pay the bills. So like you're not worried about the career part of it. You just want to fulfill some goals for your life in Japan, and that's what's fulfilling you in your experience here. The two things to be aware of in that regard are, one, your interests might change. As you get older and you become interested in different things or get bored with certain things, you'll have to ask yourself, like, is Japan still fulfilling me in the same way? Like, am I still enjoying being here? And, is there something else I can find? And if not, maybe it's time to move on. If your career is fulfilling and that's enough, then maybe you don't have to. But if your personal life and your career are kind of at a standstill and you feel like you've really gotten out of Japan what you wanted to get, then it might be time to move on. Speaking of moving on, I've definitely walked into a dead end. So just a moment. I'd like to finish talking about professional goals and personal goals in Japan by sharing with you something from my friend Dave. Dave and I had a really interesting conversation over beers at an izakaya several years ago, right before he left Japan. And he had a really clear-eyed, well-thought-out reason for leaving Japan that really struck me at the time while we were talking about it. And I asked him to re-summarize that for me in a WhatsApp conversation. And I'm just going to read to you what he came back with. And here's what he said. The long and the short of it for me was turning 30 and seeing that as a crossroads. You, meaning me, Paul, and Matt and some other foreign staff we were working with had married and started families, and so it made sense for you to keep building a life there with your wife and kids. It's definitely easier and safer to raise a family in Japan versus the US. I was unencumbered and wasn't sure if I wanted to stay in Japan for life or not, so I hedged my bets. The thought of coming home single and 45 with an expired teaching license was scary. As was marrying and starting a family and then realizing at 45 I don't want to be in Japan anymore. And I definitely didn't want to be one of those 45-year-old gaijin trying to pick up girls at the Hub, which is a British pub in Tokyo. I also didn't want to teach for life, which was a huge factor because that's all I would be qualified to do in Japan. So he just looked at his life, personally and professionally, and it's like, I don't want to teach forever. I don't want to get trapped here with the family, because once you have the family, you realize, okay, I have all these obligations, not only to the wife, but possible children, schools, the grandparents, everything else. And so he decided it was best for him to leave when he did. And that happened to be age 30 in his case, which was kind of the turning point. All right, the next thing I'm going to talk about as a consideration for staying in Japan or leaving Japan is the one that I can speak most about from a personal standpoint. But before I talk about it, let's have a word. This video is brought to you by Sakurako. This is the October snack box that they sent to me, and you are immediately struck by the beautiful packaging because the Japanese, what do they do best? Package things beautifully, and this is no exception. But we also want to see what's inside the box, so let's get in here. Sakurako wants you to experience Japan from the comfort of your own home through their snack boxes. Sakurako is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box that supports local Japanese snack makers. Each box comes with 20 traditional, authentic, and artisan Japanese snacks, including Japanese teas and a special Japanese tableware. This month's theme is Colors of Kyoto. As autumn sweeps through Japan's historical city of Kyoto, this month Sakurako invites you to experience Kyoto's rich fall delicacies, where seasonal flavors and cultural heritage come together. Enjoy authentic treats and specialty fall flavors that capture the essence of Kyoto's autumn beauty and its timeless traditions. Enjoy both rich and authentic snacks like Kyoto Arare, Kitsune Senbei, Yuzu Dorayaki, Matcha Chocolate Crunch, and many more. All of these sweets pair perfectly with the special Gyo Tsujiri Sencha from Kyoto. This one's tableware is from Floral Kamon Yumoni. In the booklet, you'll learn more about the snacks you receive as well as the allergen information, and the booklet also contains a wealth of information about Japanese culture. Okay, as someone who loves Japan, there's so much to say about this on a personal level. I love this booklet with all of the information about the places that made these treats. The sweets are really representative, I think, of Kyoto. Like these soba cookies are something that I always think of when I go to Kyoto. And of course, you have to have the Kyoto Yasuhashi, which is what a lot of people, Japanese people at least, think of when they think of Kyoto. This is one of the ubiquitous Kyoto treats. Basically, it's all packaged beautifully. It's a really lovely variety of things. Dorayaki, when I first came to Japan, I thought, wow, they just took pancakes and turned them into a Japanese treat. But this actually goes back to the Heian era, so it's hundreds of years old. And this particular version, which has yuzu in it, didn't check the manual before I opened it up and ate it and realized immediately that it wasn't the usual anko or red bean paste, but instead has this yuzu-infused white bean paste. It's appropriate for an October-autumn box that there be something of satsuma potato in here, so sweet potato is definitely an autumn delicacy, so this is very appropriate. Clearly they put a lot of thought about what goes into this box in terms of variety of items, representation of Kyoto, and making it fitting for the fall season. So it's like a friend went to Kyoto and dropped off an amazing omiyage souvenir for me. So all in all, this has been an incredibly pleasant experience, opening this box, trying some of the treats, and reading about them in this pamphlet. Seriously, if you want to give a lovely gift to friends, family, and of course yourself, if you're really missing Japan or wanting to experience a little bit of Japan, this is really an excellent way to do it. So there is a link for Sakurako down below in the video description and in the first comment, which means that if you use my link, you will also be supporting the channel, and for that I would be greatly appreciative. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the video. All right, the third consideration you want to think about when you're trying to decide, is Japan right for me, or at some point, do I need to be ready to leave, is your cultural adaptation. How well do you fit the culture of Japan? How comfortable are you working in this culture, existing in this culture, adapting to all that this place has to offer? And I would put it in terms of some videos that I've actually already done on the channel, and that is a real factor you need to consider is time. Your understanding, your knowledge, your belief about yourself, your ability to adapt to things is going to change over time in Japan. For example, I made a video on the channel about things that I hated about Japan that I actually came to really appreciate. So it went from dislike to like. Another video I made in the past was about things that I disliked about Japan at first that I made peace with, meaning I don't actually like them now, but they don't bother me anymore either. And of course, there's obviously some things that I don't like about Japan and will continue to not like about Japan. But we should also realize that this progression goes in the opposite direction as well, meaning there are some things I liked about Japan initially that now are more just normal, or I deal with it and I don't really view them as special anymore. And I'll give you a really specific example of this that might surprise you. Japanese customer service and politeness. Tourists who come to Japan always rave about how polite Japanese customer service is. But the way I would put it is, it's kind of like how you can't define good unless you have evil. Meaning you can't define polite unless you also have impolite. And what I mean by that is, tourists coming to Japan are coming from countries where very likely customer service isn't as polite as Japan, because Japan sets a very, very high bar. But after living here all these years, because the customer service is so uniform, it just becomes normal. It's no longer special. In fact, I've come to look at Japanese customer service as being more formal, or a formality, than polite. You see, they've got manuals or booklets that teach their employees how to interact with customers. and they treat everyone exactly the same way. And so in that sense, it ceases to be kind of special. Like if you're in America and you get treated really well in a customer service situation, you remember that person and you think, wow, they really treated me like a human being, and that service there was great, not what I would have expected. And you always have something to compare that against. You have the bad service in addition to that, so it makes the special service really stand out. But in Japan, it doesn't stand out. The only time I reflect on how good the service here is when I go back to the States or to another country. And don't get me wrong, I wouldn't trade Japanese customer service for anywhere else. Like, it really is the best. And so I'm not saying I don't like it or I don't want it, but it does cease to be really special. It's not a big deal anymore after a while. If you've only been in Japan for 6 months, you really need more time to really discover if this cultural balance is going to work for you, if you're going to adjust or be able to understand Japan more completely. Like 6 months to a year, it's not enough time, because around 6 months, you're probably still in the deepest parts of culture shock. And about a year, you've had a lot of ups and downs and you're kind of reaching an equilibrium. And so from that point on, you're going to be able to gain more knowledge and understanding about how you and Japan fit together. So you got to give it some time. If you bow out after the first few months, you really haven't given Japan the chance that it should have. And if you have bowed out, after 2-3 years, that's probably a more reasonable amount of time to have given Japan. So at the end of the day, just realize that it's going to take time for you to gain the knowledge, expertise, and experience that will allow you to really judge if Japan is a cultural fit for you or not. So that's the main takeaway here. Okay. The final factor or consideration I want to talk about is your mental health and well-being. Now, obviously, I'm not a mental health professional, so there's only really 2 things that I can say about this with any real affirmation or real knowledge behind it. The first is, obviously, mental health is going to be very personal, individual in terms of each and every person's experience. And so you just need to continually take stock in how you feel about your life in Japan. Do you feel lots of anxiety, depression? Is it difficult to go out? Are you having trouble in interpersonal relationships? Part of the issue is Japan is really behind when it comes to mental health services compared to the West. Japan is a gaman society where you just buckle down, grit your teeth, and keep going, and you bottle up your feelings inside and suppress and hide how you actually feel. And it's no surprise that this is the country of hikikomori, or the shut-ins, who cut themselves off from society entirely because, they're just not gonna gaman anymore. And that also means that they can't feel comfortable going out in society, and so they just become shut-ins. If you feel yourself really struggling, I think it's fair to consider that as a reason to move on from Japan. I mean, don't take your mental health in a trifling manner. And you cannot gauge this from a 2 or 3 week visit to Japan as a tourist. You can't say, I had such an amazing time, I suffer from anxiety or depression or something else back home, but while I was in Japan, it was all great. Being a tourist just is not the same as being a resident. And the second thing I can say with some force is, if you suffer from these issues back home and you're hoping that Japan will be some kind of cure for them, I would really want to offer you a caution about that, in that you're going to come to Japan and that anxiety, depression, whatever it is, may follow you here. And now you've got a foreign language and a foreign culture stacked on top of the already existing issues. And it just could be exacerbated. Exacerbated? Is that the right word? I'm losing my English. But yes, that could just make the problem worse. So you need to keep that under consideration. So yeah, take your mental health very seriously, and that's something that is going to be a very personal, person by person issue. Now, I just want to say that this is a really complicated topic and there's a lot more things I could talk about. A friend of mine actually suggested that I divide the topic into 4 different videos and talk about each consideration in its own video. Instead, I decided to try to stick to just an overview of the 4 and open it up to you in the comments section to ask for more details or examples about something, or to ask questions. And not only questions of me, but of the other people who are always in my comment section who have lived in Japan for a long time, who can offer some insight and advice as well. So please join in the comment section. In my mind, it's one of the best things about the channel, maybe the best thing, and I invite you to check it out. It's 99% civil down there too, which is, I guess, maybe a sign that I'm still a small channel. But again, despite being a small channel, check out Sakura-ko, use my code, support the channel, get your little piece of Japan if you're not here. And as I mentioned, if you're even in Japan and you want to give it a try, like, it's kind of exciting getting a box of things like someone has brought you omiyage from a different part of Japan. It was pretty nice receiving that box, I have to admit. So check out Sakura-ko. You can also support the channel directly by becoming a member, joining my Patreon, which I'll link below. But most of all, hitting that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and most importantly, like above all that, keep watching the channel, and I hope I continue to make content that you enjoy and that you get something really constructive and interesting out of. So thank you so much for watching this particular video. I'll catch you next week. Peace.